welcome back to Cheche. Thank you so much for your feedback. We'll be reading it out a little later. You could still send it in 22422. We're discussing the role of civil society in governance and other issues. And Harun, some would wonder, is there any space for civil society to laud government to say you're on the right track in this, because we don't hear it?
We do often. Not too long ago, there was an award by civil society to the DPP for being the outstanding public servant, and many other things. In any event, even the work we do generally is complementary to government, because I don't see a government, a legitimate government, that wants to do bad to its people. So when it is corrected, even if it's going to court to defend so-called terrorism suspects, and an organization like Haki Africa or Muhuri provides legal aid to terror suspects, it is seeking justice for those people, to do justice, to ensure that they are represented. In fact, murder suspects in court receive pro bono services courtesy of government, in terms of being given a lawyer by government to represent them. So there is nothing, it's all complementary. This issue of saying, classifying civil society that they are good and others bad, and other classifications,
others evil,
others are even being called evil, is what I call the effort to delegitimize civil society, because government feels deficient in areas that it's being pointed out to and is unhappy. So instead of coming to rescue itself from those failures, it starts to, throw mud at those civil society organizations or other quarters, like even opposition political parties, who point out at corruption when they are asking about the Eurobond and all that. They say, oh, this is called doing this, instead of saying, can we deal with the issue? I am finding it very difficult to understand how anyone, including members of the public, who find what Makali said, that the civil society lost face, when the very challenges of inequality, the very challenges of poverty, those challenges which have been the basis for a critical growth of civil society, still exist and probably worsened today. They exist. So when the questions are being raised, they seem to be politicized in a way that now seeks to delegitimize the messenger of the message rather than dealing with the message.
One area that you have been very vocal on, and I'm glad that you brought it up, is the question of justice, and in particular justice for victims of various crimes. And ICC has been a major issue where we've seen the civil society very loud, very vocal at this last ASP, basically saying that the Kenyan government has got it wrong. They no longer care about victims. They're out to protect two individuals. What has motivated the sort of spirited approach that we've seen from civil society?
It is not spirited. It has remained the same. It's passion. It has remained the same from before elections. If I take you back before 2007 elections, you might recall an institution called IED, which went around with caravans encouraging youth to register as voters so that they exercise their democratic rights. So, and we have done civic education, even to bring the new constitution. Civil society was actively involved in bringing the space and opportunity for exercising democratic rights. Excuse me. So that after the violence occurred in 2007, it was only natural that civil society continued to engage around those issues to find out what really caused this violence, how did it come. I do recall that I, personally, with other civil society leaders, we participated on the sidelines with the Kofi Annan mediated process. In fact, the truth is that that so-called Agenda 4, which led to the enactment of the new constitution, was an issue that civil society insisted to be included, because the politicians who were then negotiating with Kofi Annan had said, once the violence stops and there is a power-sharing arrangement, then your business is over and done with. You might recall a friend of mine.
Tipping point for you guys and for your cause.
The tipping point in terms of the country and our passion in terms of being what you may call the conscience of the public, of the people, is that this post-election violence exposed the soft underbelly of Kenya, especially its political governance. And that is why we said, can we have justice for the people of Kenya? We participated in very many levels of the engagements, and we have always been consistent to ask for justice for the victims. I don't know where that has stopped. That's why I'm saying what you are describing as a apparent spirited effort
has always been there.
It has always been there, and I call it fashion.
All right, what do you call it, Mokamen?
I would first to agree with Mr. Ndubi that I don't really think that we should be, the manner in which we should manage civil society organization must be civilized. And I think NGO Coordination Board needs to up its game. This one-man decision where the director just wakes up in the morning and says, we have registered how many NGOs, we are registering this number of people. I think it's not a proper show of constitutionalism, but also leadership in the sector. And I think that is a sector that needs, in fact, registration and the registration of NGOs. There must be a there must be either tribunal or a body that reviews that kind, because you know these institutions, some of them have been there for 30, for 40 years. You just don't wake one morning and say, okay, this is a terrorist group. You hide yourself behind terrorism and then you register a group. There must be a civilized way that we manage civil society organization in the country. So having said that, I think what Mr. Ndubi talked about the ICC issue is that, yes, that is true, that many civil society organizations have done a lot of work around gender violence, around restoring victims, around making the issue of settlement of victims come to public, seeking for justice for those victims. Very good. The only point of departure between me and them is a situation where, in furtherance of that calling to assist those victims that suffered as a post-election violence, you try to force a process that is unjust, that is being faced by William Ruto and Sang, by saying that by all means, you know, by all means, rules like Rule 68, which could not have applied anywhere in any civilized society retroactively, should apply retroactively, because in furtherance of that justice, you believe that the only way you can achieve that justice is to try William Ruto and Joshua Arap Sang using a flawed process. I would have thought that in insisting for justice for the victims, you must also insist that there must not be creation of other victims of the trial process, where there must be justice also for the accused, because there is no remedy that is going to be achieved by the victims by virtue of unjustly trying William Ruto and Joshua Arap Sang. That is really my argument.
In what ways do you think they have crossed the line? Especially when it comes to submissions at ASP.
Absolutely. I was with my friend in the ICC and ASP, and that's where really my eyes got open as to the extent of this evil, in terms of you know, the evil orchestrated against William Ruto and Joshua Arap Sang. When Gladwell Otieno spoke, and you know, I took the liberty to also record what she said. When she outrightly misrepresented facts. For example, she said that Yabei was killed around the home of William Ruto, was abducted around the home of William Ruto, and misrepresented facts to the ASP that he was the prosecution witness. When actually one of the persons who's complaining about the death of Yabei is the defense, because he's a witness of William Ruto. When you go out there and say outrightly nothing, zero, nothing has been established.
Was that established as to whose witness
let me just complete what I'm saying. I mean, the claim by William Ruto that his witness, he wrote to the ICC to investigate it. ICC said they are busy investigating what happened. It's not a contestable fact. If you go to the same conference, you know, when people say nothing completely has been done to victims of post-election violence, we know that the government, if there is a government that started this process, it's the coalition government. And for 4 years, they did as much as they could in terms of resettlement. This government upped that resettlement program to up to about 7 billion shillings being spent on the resettlement program for purpose of, it may not have been complete, but it helps, like you were asking, Harold, it helps to point out that this much has been achieved in our country, but this much is still remaining. You know, so that we can be able to become truthful to that fact. That is only my point of departure.
I think, Harun, some of the criticism that civil society have faced, especially when it regards ASP and ICC cases, has been, as Mokamen has said, a misrepresentation of facts. For instance, leaflets being circulated on the sidelines of meetings like that clearly point to events pre the Jubilee government and point them out as the fact of the day. One in particular that I have seen is of pictures pictures of, when journalists were protesting under the Kibaki regime, and then using those pictures to push the agenda that this is the media being muzzled, under the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. There is the feeling that there's a kind of self-deprecation that is done by civil society that paints its country in such a derogatory light, or in such a negative light, that there is no sense of patriotism. How do you see it?
Very good. I don't know about those leaflets you're talking about, because the ones that we do as KPTJ, we label them as KPTJ. We own what we write, and we do not misrepresent facts as KPTJ. You may have a different opinion as to how you interpret a particular fact, but that is a right everyone has. So Murkomen should be free to feel as if Gladwell misrepresented a fact. But let's not get...
facts.
Facts are just facts. They speak, and they are usually very, very, very stubborn. What I want to say about the role of civil society regarding what happened at the ASP was first not to ask that let these cases be terminated. In fact, Murkomen misrepresents a view that I think is important to correct. We are not saying Ruto and Sang must be convicted. We are saying the victims deserve the right to the trial to be completed, the trial to go through its full course. We are also saying let the court be the one to... No. I don't... I listen keenly silently when you speak, so don't interrupt me. We are saying that it is the court which ought to be independent, and its independence respected by the members of the ASP. Especially Kenya ought to respect the court, and let the court be the one to make determinations on the application of that rule, because it's a judicial process. You can imagine if in our country today here, a matter that is ongoing, in fact from here I'm going to court to defend someone, that when they are unhappy about some rule, they run back to Parliament and say, please amend that one, let's go there. That is basically what the government of Kenya is doing. But the other question you need to ask yourself is this: what is the role of the Kenyan government as a state party to the ASP and the ICC in regard to trials of anyone, whether it is Ruto or Haron Dubi or Murkomen another day? Is the role of government to replace the defense team of the accused person, or is the role of government as a member of the state parties, as a member of the statute, supposed to facilitate the court to do its best? What we have seen... Is the role
of government also to protect all its citizens?
Including the victims. And that such protection must come through government supporting the judicial process without interference, so that the victims get justice, the victims get to know the truth. Including the accused? Including the accused. That's what we are saying. We are not saying that Ruto must be convicted. We are saying let the trial conclude logically.
Anne, let me just correct that point. The right of the accused includes not to go on trial. If there are no, or to his defense, if there is no enough evidence that have been, or if the prosecutor has not made his case. Or if due process is involved. You see, when you say you are a human rights organization, you fight for rights of everybody. But when the rights of those who are accused is being trampled upon, you are pushing that this thing must go on trial, the victims deserve justice. You are actually saying, insinuating that the only way the victims deserve justice to ensure that William Ruto and Joshua Arap Sang are dragged through a very unjust process. Mr. Ndubi knows this, and he's a common law lawyer.
So you have no trust in ICC?
You have 2013 a rule that is changed midway. He knows very well that once trial begins, you must not change the rules of evidence. Those rules of evidence have been changed midway. There was an understanding that it should not apply retroactively. They come here, instead of saying that the justice process required that is for the victims and for the accused should be treated fairly, and that rule should not apply retroactively, they come to the ICC and say what? You must apply that rule. In any case, Uhuru Kenyatta killed eight Mungiki victims. In any case, Ayabe was killed around the home of William Ruto without saying that he was a defense witness. Really, I have always said this. The problem of some civil society organization is being unable to differentiate between their country and the government of the day. You must be patriotic enough to represent your country for what it is, even if you have questions with the government.
In what ways do they misrepresent Kenya?
I mean, when you go there and say that there is nothing which has been done at all, anybody who lives in this country knows that a lot of effort has been put in restoring.
There is a point to which obviously a lot has been done, but in one way and not in another way. And I think
what do you mean by that?
In terms of resettling the victims, giving them some form of compensation, some victims, families have been compensated. In fact, I read this week that there is another budget about how many billions for something that is going to further compensate the victims who were not captured in the last. And of course, when people raised, they said not everybody had been taken care of. There was uproar. The government disagreed, said everybody has been taken care of. But now we see again another allocation going out. So this double speak on government is actually what angers people. And then two, that is about compensation. But there is the other aspect of justice, that have people been prosecuted? The criminals, have they been apprehended? Has justice been visited upon murderers? And that is where the problem is. On that side, nothing has been done because the 5,000 or so suspects were all cases were closed for lack of evidence. So do you mean to tell me that
a failure of local authorities perhaps in the collection of that evidence of the Director of Public Prosecutions and what he's been able to put forward in court? But could you touch on what Murkomen has said about a sense of patriotism, that there's a certain line one should not cross?
No, you see, again, the problem with the Murkomen's narrative, and where I also have a bit of difficulty, is that the state, if it was supposed to protect all its citizens, the state does not protect citizens when they are criminally liable or suspect to criminal charges. That's not the responsibility of the state. And that's why it should not, the state should not arise in the case of an individual charged in a court or another who's whoever. We're not protecting citizens as if they're under attack from a foreign enemy. These are people who are before a judicial process, you get. So the difference here on when a state comes in and when it doesn't is where the issue is. Has the state worked to its limits, to the extent it's expected, or has it gone out of its way to defend?
Let me, Harun, come back to my question on patriotism again. Is there, because that is what government says, that, you know, you must be patriotic, and that to some extent Kenyan civil society crossed the line in their accusations against government, that there isn't that sense of national pride that in equal measure you must be able to defend.
In fact, yesterday the Attorney General said they're operating like teenagers. When something goes wrong at home, they go shouting on the roadside.
Preteens or early teens?
I don't know what the AG meant. The AG should be asked certain questions because he's the one who's supposed to help the government to deal with the failures to investigate. The DPP is there, but the AG is the overall head of the justice system in any event. Patriotism. I think no one is more patriotic than a person that is seeking justice for the least, the most vulnerable. You cannot say that when civil society are seeking justice for the most vulnerable, that they are therefore unpatriotic. This patriotism thing, I know that people look at it with skewed eyes depending on where they come from and what they see. But if you are saying that the government has indeed done nothing, coming to what Murkomen is saying, yes, it has done nothing in terms of criminal justice. It has shown that it has failed. It has shown that it has no capacity. It has shown that it has no interest to prosecute, to investigate and prosecute. The DPP himself...
Why were you awarding the DPP then?
Sorry, question.
Why were you awarding the DPP then? Because those onus are on himself, and then Chief Justice Willie Mutunga.
Civil society organizations are many and many forms. I said one was...
Oh, you're not
no. I'm not disowning the award for him. What I'm saying is he was awarded for being the most outstanding public servant, and the basis of that judgment, I don't know.
But no failure.
But let us get to the issue I'm discussing here. A country becomes under the jurisdiction of the ICC when it has demonstrated all those failures I've talked about. Now, we have also shown that the government Indeed, the government has been accused by the ICC, the prosecutor, that they used systems, including the judiciary and the AG's office, to subvert the investigations. You recall Justice Rawal had been appointed by the ICC to take statements from provincial commanders and provincial commissioners.
Right. Yeah.
Some two businessmen, through a lawyer who is a member of the National Assembly, Kangata Irungu, went to court and they filed some petition in 2011 saying, we don't want those people to come to interfere with our what do they call it?
That's a justice process.
No. It's okay, I'm explaining. They said that we are interfering with our sovereignty. The Attorney General and some lawyers who went representing certain interests, later on they turned to be lawyers of some of the accused persons in the ICC, went and agreed by consent to stop the investigations, to say until this case is heard and determined, there should be an injunction. To date, they have done nothing.
Return to the Petros.
That's the court. No. That's the point I'm making to you, Anne, that those people who are now seeking justice for the most vulnerable victims are the most patriotic people of them all. This idea of saying, when you go out there, because Kenya is a member of the community of civilized nations, we cannot isolate ourselves. When we come here, we say, oh, you can't talk about... This is a question we were asking us when we were at The Hague the other day, in the corridors or in the hotel lobbies. They would say, but why are we fighting here? Why don't we talk back home? In fact, Amina Mohammed gave me her telephone mobile number.
Did you call?
No, she called me when we were at The Hague.
So have you called her?
the issue is all this. There have been many ASPs before. There have been many processes of the judicial process. In fact, civil society organizations have filed a petition in this court, High Court here, seeking reparations for women who suffered gender-based violence. We have not had government talk about that case.
Sorry, let me actually legitimize that question, because C.S. Amina, the Foreign Affairs Secretary, says that she has invited civil society to the table to talk about what they believe the real issues are and how government and civil society can forge a way forward. Perhaps that exchange of numbers is actually,
maybe the beginning, because she's in France now.
Are you not receptive to that?
I took the number. She's in France talking about climate change. And there are other civil society organizations here talking about climate change. I don't understand where we differ. The only point is we as civil society speak from a particular value-based process.
Are you willing
government
to sit at the
speaks
table
from
with government?
Interest-based process.
Are you willing to sit at the table with government and negotiate?
We have always sat on the table. GJ laws, if you recall, when you were talking about the Kibaki regime, GJ laws was a process that brought civil society and government together to discuss programs. In fact, some of the best laws which were enacted at the time with the input of civil society, because the government was actually now the one forced by donors to sit with civil society. Some of the laws were passed with the input of civil society. When the new regime came and decided that civil society, because of the petition that was filed by Gladwell and Zaid, they decided we are not going to engage with these people. In fact, that is how they started now the effort to delegitimize further and say you should not receive any funding beyond 15% of your budget from external sources without providing an alternative from internal sources. Basically ensuring that they disable civil societies completely. If you look at the way government is reacting to trade unions, they have destabilized them completely, that they are unable to do what this government of Jubilee is doing. And I will get back to the ICC case, but it's important you see the threat, that they want to see every possible avenue of pressure disabled completely, so that they can rule with their whim without accountability or without being asked questions.
But what do you think?
Going back to the ICC and the questions we were asking, I have not heard Murkomen or any member of government ask when the ICC prosecutor alleges that witnesses have been killed or have disappeared or have been bribed, all of them being criminal offenses. In fact, there have been warrants of arrest issued against Kenyans. The government of Kenya has done nothing to help the ICC investigate those in terms of the responsibility in complementarity, has not investigated those allegations. In fact, there is even a further damning allegation by the OTP that these witnesses, most of them, disappeared or recanted their evidence after their identities were disclosed to the defense. I'm not saying anything beyond what the ICC
Can I say something about that?
First
of all, what prosecution says is not absolute truth. what can only be truth is when it's proved in a court of law. Second, is a contradiction.
So they can say anything?
They can say anything. It's a prosecution. The second is to say that when that now civil society organization pick what the prosecution says, without saying it has been said by the prosecution, without saying that it's an allegation, and presents it in an international forum as an absolute truth, you know, that is the kind of patriotism we are saying that is lacking. Second, I find it difficult to understand what Mr. Aaron Dubi is talking about when he contradicts himself. He says that, you know, people going to Kenyan courts, seeking justice in Kenyan courts, defending themselves in Kenyan courts. For example, the person's warrant of arrest were issued against Kenyan government cooperated to the extent that the only stumbling block to handing over those people to face the trial in ICC is the courts itself. And those courts, we are saying we want our Kenyan courts to be independent. Did you want the president to go against the courts and take certain action? For example, in the testimony against William Ruto and Joshua Rapsang, the court ordered that there must be certain witness must be produced and must testify in a specified location here in Nairobi with or some part of this country with a video link. The government did that. When he talks about DPP, he knows very well that there are some people who are found guilty in Nakuru, for example. I saw another one in Kericho. I saw another one in Nairobi here. There are a pocket of people who are found guilty on post-election related violence issues. There are those who are released. The 5,000 files that he's speaking about, the ICC investigation team came and sat in the office of DPP for 1 month, took over a whole floor of DPP's office to go through all the 5,000 files. And they were satisfied that the DPP had done enough to conclude that these files could not proceed beyond what it was. You know, Mr. Aaron Dubi so well as a lawyer that justice process does not promise results. It is the process itself. You cannot promise the world that I will pick Mr. Mutegi and I must convict him. As long as you go through the investigation
and Harun, I think, process, has made it clear more than once that is not what they're saying. They're saying due process must be followed. Unfortunately, we have to take our next break. Hopefully we'll be coming back with your feedback and final comments after these messages.